recording.
Okay.
And let's start. So, a fifth of Ukrainian territory remain under occupation, and invaders really do what they want at the territory. And the situation in war zones is approaching a humanitarian disaster. And in the infrastructure for supplying water, gas, electricity is destroyed, and there is no enough food and medicine. Well, how to overcome this crisis like this?
That is the question of the year, I think, because this is so large, this is so massive, and certainly the government should be expending its resources in the most seriously impacted areas. You know, in my opinion, the most seriously impacted areas need the greatest attention, but it's such a large scale, like you mentioned, almost bordering on a humanitarian crisis. I would call it a humanitarian crisis because of all the displaced people, all the damage and the infrastructure. It's such a serious situation. And so as I mentioned, I think the government needs to step in and do what they can do in the most seriously impacted areas. And from what I've seen, your people have done a great job of rallying together. They're resilient people, they're strong, and together we can solve these crises, but it's difficult. It's certainly difficult, and especially now that we're in winter and you have, as you mentioned, very, very cold temperatures. It's just such a difficult situation. People have to group together, they have to work together, and between them and the government, bring this country back to its feet again.
As you spoke about the winter, so what survival strategy should the government follow in such conditions, and what basic rules should the population follow in this situation? Maybe some practical advice.
Okay, certainly. Yes, and it sounds like there are some call them humanitarian centers or warming centers. There are some places that people can go, and the government, it sounds like, is doing a pretty good job of trying to set those up, because those temperatures are bitter cold. Those are so cold and actually very dangerous. And it sounds like many of the people only have power maybe a portion of the day. So to the extent the people can provide warmth for themselves during those times, and then the centers where they can get some heat, hopefully that is going to meet a need. But you have such a large population, it's probably very difficult to get that many places for people to go. Some of the practical things that we talk about are things like setting up a tent in your home. That creates a microenvironment that allows you to stay warmer if you have another layer that's providing insulation to protect you. Things like sealing up the cracks, if there's little cracks in the doors or windows or wherever they may be, if you can seal those up and keep the cold out, the warmth in, that's a very good thing to do. Certainly, if you do have some heat, you want to focus that on one smaller area. So instead of trying to heat the whole house, you try and bring those resources and heat one smaller area where you can really make a difference. Instead of trying to heat an entire home, heating a smaller area is much easier. So just some things like that. Certainly, if those who have, you know, wood burning stoves or coal burning stoves and have the ability to get the fuel, and maybe they can invite their neighbors. We very much believe in community, in people working together. This is too big for a government to handle, but if people can work together, then you know, and maybe that looks like you invite someone into your home, and you all stay warmer because there's more people and you're in a small space and you're heating a small area. And especially our elderly, those who are disabled or compromised, the community effort to reach out and know these people and be aware of them and check on them and help them is certainly something that we suggest.
Are there any protocols anywhere in the world what to do with less mobile population groups, such as children or elderly, if they are in war zone?
I'm not aware of any standards throughout the world, but certainly there are more vulnerable people that need our attention and our help. And I think this is one place that the government should put their resources, is into making sure that those people are safe. Those people need help, and they should provide whatever is needed to help. If that's an evacuation, if that's just people in place that need a little help, that would be a great place, I think, for government resources. But as far as a kind of a standard out there, I'm not aware of anything. But certainly that is something that should be looked at. So, each country should look at, okay, how are we going to deal with this kind of situation? And you're right, this could happen to anyone. This could happen to any country. And that was the reason that the American Civil Defense Association began, is these people saw a need. They saw the threats that could happen. And it's a way of educating people and providing help and resources to take care of, especially the most vulnerable people, but the entire country. Now, whether the people take that advice is a different matter. And quite frankly, here in the United States, a lot of people don't want to think about these kinds of possibilities. I think one thing the Ukraine war has done is help people realize that these things do happen. We live kind of in a spoiled world, and we haven't seen much of this kind of thing for the most part. Not clear back to World War II, but these things can happen, and we need to make preparations both as governments and as individual citizens.
Are you studying the experience of Ukraine in overcoming this crisis, and maybe you have already done some conclusions?
Yeah, so I've been watching this for the better part of a year now, and grieving for the situations and the things that are happening. And again, it comes back to this combined effort of governments and the citizens. These kinds of things are too big for any government to handle. It's too much for them to try and take care of everything. So it's this situation where the government has certain things that they should do, protecting the people in the case of war, large-scale disasters. The problem is here, we don't have something like an earthquake or a flood where it affects a small area and these resources can pour in and help fix it. We're talking about most of a country that's been damaged and harmed, and trying to deal with all that. So this has to be a combination effort. The citizens of a country need to realize that these things can happen, and they can take steps such as having a little bit of food stored, having some fuel on hand, these kinds of things, because what that does is it buys people time. If you have these resources to get by for a while, then you can figure out, okay, how do we take the next step? It also helps the government and the country because there's not as much need being unmet. People are meeting part of that need themselves, and then the government can try and step in and meet the remainder of that need. And as I said, right now, this is such a huge situation. I respect you and your people for what you're going through and the difficulties, and hope that this will be resolved sometime soon.
Thank you very much. And maybe you can name examples of states whose infrastructure is ready for this kind of emergency, and maybe you can name the first steps what should be done if the infrastructure is not ready.
Okay. There are countries that are more prepared than others around the world, but in most cases, they're not prepared for this scale of disaster. So this is very hard. For example, here in the United States, water treatment systems, sewer treatment systems, a lot of these kinds of infrastructure, they are designed with some redundancy in mind. They're designed with the thought, okay, what if something happens? What if we have a longer term power outage? But in many cases, we're only talking about them being prepared for maybe a week or two of disruption. So when we're talking about something this large, it's much more difficult. I'm not aware of any country out there that could just go for a year or two or three with. There's just not the resources, not the ability to put infrastructure in place to cover all these eventualities. So, to the extent that you can, that your electrical grid can adapt and shift power to places that may be impacted, that's a good thing. And I'm sure that you've probably done some of that as they developed your power grid. And the same with maybe natural gas supplies or other supplies, the ability to shift those resources around as demands require. That's a good thing. But as I said, I'm not aware of any country that could take on the kind of situation that you're dealing with without some really, really difficult challenges.
And how should any country in general prepare for the fact that people may not have anything to eat or water and no electricity and heating?
Again, there's two roles here. There's a government role and there's a citizen role. The government certainly should do whatever planning they can do to provide for these situations. And again, that is somewhat limited just simply because of resources. Most governments do not have the money or the personnel or the other resources to handle these kinds of situations. But certainly there must be planning. There must be planning so that there are some reserve food supplies, so that there are reserve fuel supplies. And that's not easy to do, but it is doable. On the citizen side, the citizens of each country should say, especially after we see situations like this could happen to us. We should prepare. We should have some food on hand. And we recommend that people have a 3-month supply of everyday foods. And that doesn't happen all at once. For most people, that's not something they just go out and do. It's something that you build up over time, just a little bit at a time. And then they have a longer term food supply of things like rice or beans or those kinds of things that are stored for long-term storage that they can have in their home and to be able to help them and their neighbors, their family. So again, we're talking about this combined effort of the government doing some serious planning and doing what they can do, and the citizens doing what they can do. And I think that's, in the world that we live, that's the ideal situation, is that it's this combination partnership.
Okay, thank you very much for your interview, and thank you very much your country for supporting Ukraine. So now United States proves that they are real guard of democracy in the world, and thanks to your country, we now fighting, and I hope we will soon we will win soon. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. Do you want to talk about any other practical items?
Yes, if you can, if you've got something to add, maybe I didn't ask you about that because I don't know how to ask proper questions. So you can tell us. Yes, yes, please.
Okay, certainly, and this can be woven in if it's appropriate. So I will just talk about some of the practical things that the citizenry can do to perhaps help with situations like this, the current situation and other situations. And I recognize that it's difficult because we're right in the middle of it right now. So to say you need to go do this, it's going to be difficult for some people to do these things because the situation is hard right now. But let's just talk a little bit about food.
Yes.
We talked about that 3-month supply, and then a longer term food supply that people can build up in their homes, and have that for hard times, whether that's the loss of a job or a financial crisis within the country or something larger like this war. So those kinds of things, the ability to grow a garden. Most people have the ability to grow maybe even just a small garden, but the ability to have that food, and I recognize that we're right in the middle of winter now, but as we look towards spring, perhaps people could look at growing a garden, at putting in some crops that would help them. Talking about water, of course, we recommend having some water stored in your home. I'm not a huge fan of the small plastic water bottles, but they have their place. They're very portable, so you could have some cases of those where you could throw them in the car if you had to leave, or they're just easy to use, all the way up to some larger water tanks or water barrels, depending on how much room you have and where you could store that. Having that water available to you, again, it takes the load off of the municipal systems, and it provides you with a safe drinking water source and for sanitation, to help in any kind of a crisis. And then the ability to treat some water. At some point, maybe that water runs out, the water that you have stored. So having the ability to a filter or some supplies to disinfect and filter water, if there's a good, reliable source of water nearby that they could treat and provide for themselves. Talking about heating, we kind of talked about this already, but sealing up the cracks in your walls or doors, whatever might be letting that cold air in, upgrading the insulation, especially in the ceiling, is something good to do. Covering windows. Windows are a weak spot because glass lets heat and cold through very readily. So if you can put another layer of insulation over there, whether that's some cardboard or some plastic, something like that, that helps insulate and makes it less, your home less likely to suffer those temperature swings. We talked about the tent, setting up a tent in your home, a place where you could sleep at night, at least, that would be warmer than the home itself if you don't have the ability to heat. And we talked about creating smaller areas that you could heat more easily than trying to heat your home. And a big part of this for me is the safety aspect. There's carbon monoxide, there's the risk of fire with some of the devices. So you need to just make sure that you're safe in what you do, that you're heating your home safely. As far as power goes, I'm sure some of your citizens have generators, and hopefully they can get the fuel to use those, and hopefully they share that with others, that they use that to help other people. There's solar generators, portable power stations, and fuel-based generators. So there's some options out there if people want to be able to provide some of their own power. And again, that takes the load off of the larger systems. And then you had mentioned the elderly in and the people that are vulnerable. This comes back to community. This comes back to getting to know our neighbors, who's around us, who's our family and our friends and our neighbors, and especially those that might need some help or that are in difficult situations, and just people checking on each other. As I mentioned, what I've seen is a people that comes together. Now that doesn't happen with everyone, but I think in these crisis situations, a lot of people come together. They glue themselves together because they need to, because there's strength in unity and there's strength in helping each other. And so building that community where we know our neighbors and we check on them and we try and help each other. And just this sense of pulling together, I think is so important. And so we pray for you. We are doing what we can do to try and help. And again, I hope that this will resolve quickly. I hope that there doesn't have to be more bloodshed. There doesn't have to be more destruction. It just isn't what we need to do. And I hope that this resolves quickly.
And I must say that this war showed that Ukrainians are a real nation, and we were so united. We did so many things together. When the situation was really scary, neighbors united and sitting in a basement, they decided who is on duty today to cook food on fire in the yard, or so they organized how to protect their own yard. And in my house, the men, they organized them duties, so they there were no security, and so they took this part and they started to protect the entrances to our house, and they made this, like barricade in front of garage doors, so not to let anyone you don't know to come into the yard. And so it was very, very strong, and it showed that if we are together, we really can do everything. We can.
And you are so right. That is the beautiful side of this. If there's any beauty in this,
Yes.
it's people coming together and working together and loving each other and trying to make the situation work. So that's a wonderful. I appreciate you mentioning that, because that warms my heart that this is what we do. It's what we do. We pull together and we help each other.
Yes, in big cities, we hardly know our neighbors in big block of flats. And now I know almost all my neighbors, and know that that man can do that, and that can do that, and that provides that, and this lady is volunteer, she can help with that. And so it helps to collaborate, and it's great. It's really great. Now,
And that helps.
yes, sorry.
That helps you now, and it also helps you in the future with anything else that might happen. You know each other, and that is a beautiful thing.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, after our report will be on our website, I ask our producer to send to you, and I can send it to you directly. Thank you very much. And
Thank you so much, Olga. It's so nice to meet you.
And I hope we can maybe later we can do some more reports when we think about the topic, what can we speak about, and I will appreciate your help. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. You let me know if we can do something in the future. I'd love to collaborate together. This is fun, working together again.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, bye bye.
All right, thank you, Olga. Goodbye.